So hello, SEL and EDU family. We are so elated to have you join us again for another episode. Krista, how is it holding up in this spring season?
It's fabulous. I have been up since 5:30. I got a 90-minute trail walk in already, which is not usual for me. So I'm feeling good. And I'm super excited about our guest. I was Googling and trying to learn more, and I'm kind of fangirling a little bit. So I am going to let you introduce. How are you doing today, real quick?
I'm doing well. This is, it is Good Friday. So by the time our listeners, hear it, this is Good Friday. For us in the Northeast, we have our spring break coming up. And I am excited to be able to finally start an above ground garden. I've never done that before, but I'm excited and geeked to do that. Find some time at somebody's beach or water because I'm not able to travel as much because I just got a new home and got to invest in a new home. But I will definitely enjoy a great staycation. So that's coming up.
Nice. I need a quick question.
Yes.
An above ground garden as
Yes.
opposed to I'm a little confused. I just need a little more clarity, please.
Yeah. So what I am planning to do, So my dad is got a great green thumb. He has grown and continues to grow vegetables and fruits, and he goes right into the ground. So he'll go into the back into the earth right in the backyard and start creating this plot. I'm looking at starting either an above ground garden bed. So it's just really like some 2x4s, and you have, maybe some type of bed that you can place above the ground that I could start with, or I could do some pots and actually create like tomato plants and strawberry plants that grow up on a vine in their own self-contained situation. So.
Well, thank you for that, because I'm seeing a lot of threads and analogies we could be making around growing plants and above ground, underground, and our topic today.
Yes, all learning is social emotional. Well, we could keep on talking because that's what we do, but I think it is important to introduce our guest, uh, Dr. David Adams. I am elated. I had an opportunity to meet him in New York at an urban assembly event some years ago. And incredibly charismatic, but caring and generous in spirit. I mean, he had such an electric, but humble, feel in the space. And I was honored that I had an opportunity to spend time with him, break bread with him, and we've been connected for a number of years now. And so I'm super excited that it's super busy, like super busy, that he was able to find a little pocket of time to share with us. So before we welcome him to the podcast and officially just let him, shed his light and love on the world, let me share a little bit more about who this man is. David is the Chief Executive Officer of the Urban Assembly. He started with UA in 2014 as the Director of Social Emotional Learning, where he created the Resilient Scholars Program, a unique approach to integrating SEL into curriculum and classroom practices across the UA network. The Resilient Scholars Program has grown into a national program serving districts in Los Angeles, Houston, Syracuse, Boston, because UA is supporting my community as well, yes, and other cities. As the Senior Director of Strategy, David has led the expansion of the organization to a model provider of school support with an emphasis on innovation and equity in public education. In 2021, he received the Champion of Equity Award from the American Consortium for Equity in Education. He sits on the board of CASEL and is the author of the Educator's Practical Guide to Integrating Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Programs in Organizations. He is a civil affairs officer in the Army Reserve, holds a master's of ed psychology from Fordham, and he's a dynamic dad as well. Few people may know that, but he is an incredible father as well. I'm so excited and honored and humbled to welcome Dr. David Adams.
Well, thank you, Craig. Thank you, Krista. Listen, I wish I could be back in Boston with you right now, really experiencing that joy that you just brought together. Very excited to be on the show, Craig. I remember I came to visit Boston. We did a lap around the school back when you were principal. We got really right into the situation. You taught me a lot about growth, how to focus on growth in order to reorient systems and structures towards things that matter. And I just had an opportunity to write in the Daily News that same notion of helping that move New York City's system towards growth. So appreciate all the things that you're doing, Craig. Keep the faith, stay strong out there. I see your work, and I'm just very excited to be in community with you today.
Love, man. Number love. Krista, what are your thoughts? I know that you already had shared earlier, like you couldn't wait. So go ahead and kick it off. Like I feel like I got a small glimpse into David, but go ahead.
I do. I have a list of questions. But actually I thought of another one while we were talking. And David, I would love to know what laid the foundation for you to really want to focus in on social emotional learning. Like, I was a high school teacher, and I realized that I loved working with the students more than I loved my content, and that was what I was really there for, even before I knew it was called SEL 22 years ago. And so I'd love to know your story of walking into this important and really critical topic.
Well, Chris, it's a great question. And I'm gonna use a small analogy here. So I was kind of a little bit gifted with this power of observation. When I was in high school and college, I would just have the opportunity to look around and start to be able to see, observe, and try to understand what I've been seeing and observing. And one of the things that I saw and observed, right, was that students who excelled in school weren't just smart. They applied certain kinds of skill sets that allowed them to solve the kinds of problems that schools put forth for us, right? I watched them around how they set goals. I watched them around how they related to the work, how they persevered. And there's another thing I watched, and I don't know if you saw this, but if you look at a cross-country team in any high school, it's usually like the smartest, most kind of disciplined people who excel in cross-country. And there's like a big overlap between cross-country teams and the kinds of folks who are in the top tiers of schools, right? Because turns out the same kinds of skills for cross-country, discipline, delay of gratification, be able to set and achieve goals, are the same kind of skills that students use to be successful in school. And so I was really invested in what was called back then non-cognitive or social emotional skills. Now we call it social emotional learning. And really invest in understanding what kinds of ways, if intelligence is relatively fixed, what kinds of things can we support our young people with that are not fixed, that are malleable, that we can develop their skills in so that they can contribute the best versions of themselves to society. So I got to social emotional learning at Rutgers University. Dr. Maurice Elias exposed me to this notion. He said, there are things that drive a wide variety of outcomes. Things like academic success, things like relationship success, things like the ability to make good decisions and build strong foundations. And he called those skills social emotional learning. And I was blessed to have his class with Dr. Maurice Elias. Then I moved on to the Center for Social Emotional Education, focused on school climate, some of the facilitators of social emotional learning. Went over to Yale University, the Health, Emotion, and Behavior Laboratory. Now it's the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Went out to England for about a year and really focused on implementation challenges. How do we answer how questions as opposed to why questions or what questions? Came back to New York City, focused on special education, particularly students classified as emotionally disturbed, which is a really important kind of population, disproportionately Black, disproportionately male, disproportionately poor. It's a really good understanding of the challenges of our education system. I came over to the Urban Assembly, Director of Social Emotional Learning, Senior Director of Strategy, and then CEO with you here with Krista and Craig today having this conversation.
It's fascinating to hear our entry points, because I think having served on what we called the SAP team, the Student Assistance Program, I was supporting students who were experiencing barriers to learning. And so I came into SEL at a different angle, looking at my students who I loved and had in class, but didn't necessarily have all the external supports that they needed to thrive. And we're still working on developing those social emotional learning skills. And so I find that really fascinating. And my middle son is on the cross country team. And so now I want to dig in a little bit more deeply on what you just shared there.
He's going to do all right. Wrestling is another sport that really drives persistence and those kinds of core skills that I think that are help us be successful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to kick it over to Craig because I do have a habit of just question.
I think it's all good. I mean, it's a continued conversation because I know that we all have the heart of young people, in the work that we do every day across the communities we serve. David, one of the things that I find impressive is that, under your leadership, Urban Assembly has been able to really develop social emotional learning and well-being curriculum and experiences for isn't it 1,600 schools? I know that UA has 23 schools, but about 1,600 schools in New York City alone are infused with the some really great tools and strategies and practices that you all have developed. What have you found to be most inspiring in the work that you've been able to see in the course of this last year, especially with the pandemic?
Yeah. So I appreciate that question, Craig. We came out of this pandemic and we were forced to reconcile our view of education with the reality of what students were experiencing. And we went to a model where we were really focused on content, right? We were using Google Classroom. Did you turn in the assignment? Did you not? And we didn't really have the same opportunity to watch students learn, right? To really go back to that notion of observation, to watch how students were approaching tasks, to watch how students were interacting with themselves and others in the context of a classroom. We know the data coming out of the pandemic found that students had high levels of social isolation, and it was worse as the ages increased, right? Not so bad for elementary school, but really, really difficult in terms of high school students. And so New York City came out of the space and said, we need to make sure that we are promoting the social and emotional assets of young people. We need to make sure that we're doubling down in our investment of what it means to be educated, and ensuring that schools are places where students learn about the world and themselves. Right. And so we were partnered with the Department of Education and Aperture Education to both assess student social and emotional development and then organize systems and structures to support that. And there's some key things here, Craig, that we're really, really proud of. One of the first things is that we really focused on asset-based development. How do we make sure that we build on students' existing strengths? This is not about reducing mental health needs. This is about increasing the assets that students bring to bear in solving inter and intrapersonal problems, right? The second thing we're really proud of is thinking about how we organize schools and systems around this notion of social and emotional and academic development, right? That it's not a question only of student individual competencies. It's also a question around how our environments are organized. How are we creating classroom experiences so that students can relate to each other, can speak to each other? What points of connection do students have with the school, with the teacher, with the classroom, with their parents? And so we've been pushing folks to really think about this because communication is driven by assessment, right? Communication is driven by these tools that have people ask questions of themselves and their schools. And the last thing I would say we're very proud of, and I'm very, very proud of this, is I watched a school in the Bronx. I received an artifact in which students really debriefed on their social emotional skills. And one of the challenges with assessment, especially at scale, is that folks can think that assessment is the be all end all, right? Like I have assessed, I now know things. But we know, Craig, that the point of assessment is to drive learning and to drive feedback so that students know their strengths and challenges, and then incorporate that into learning plans. And I got these artifacts, and it was so far away from me, right? Now I'm CEO. I have a director of social and emotional learning. I have a deputy director of social and emotional learning. I have program coaches. And all the way back up, I received this artifact of students debriefing on their social emotional strengths, their social emotional challenges, and what they're going to do to get better at, responsibility and to enhance their already strong, let's say, self-management. I was so proud of that because that is 1,600 schools. Not everybody's knocking out of the park, but to receive something like that reflects the vision of what it means to have really high quality feedback around social emotional learning made my day, made my week, and that's why I'm sharing it with you today.
Thank you.
That fills my heart so much, because as somebody who is also interested in looking at systems, I feel that we often design things for students and not with them. And so the fact that the students are already being invited into this process and they're grappling with self-assessment and setting their own goals and monitoring them, I think that's the ideal place to be. That it's not, I firmly believe that social emotional learning is who you are and what you do. A program can help you maybe feel more confident and develop some confidence, but it needs to be the glasses that you're wearing, and that it's not just a 30-minute piece. It's everywhere, in school, out of school. And just inviting the students into that part really gives them, I think, a sense of agency and lets them have some ownership over the process so that it's being co-created.
100%. And, when you scale something from 23 schools to 1,600 schools, there is something lost in translation. It's like when you watch a movie based on a book and you're like, oh, the book was a different kind of experience than the movie, right? So to have some of these intricacies built into the concept, right? To know that the purpose of assessment is to drive feedback, and the purpose of feedback is to drive learning, right? That made me very, very proud. And we're seeing that across the city. We're seeing it in comprehensive high schools with 5,000 kids. We're seeing it in our small schools with 400 kids. We're seeing it in special education schools and career and technical education schools. And that's what it takes to drive student agency. For a student to have that sense, to know what it is that they're working on, to be able to name it, claim it, integrate it. That's what social emotional learning is all about. So I resonate with you there, Krista, and I'm very, very, very proud of the work that we're doing here in New York and beyond.
That's awesome. May I ask a follow-up question for that? Based on what Craig had said about something that you're really proud of, it also has me thinking, what advice do you give systems where maybe they've made missteps with the implementation process? I would love to hear where you might see some of those common missteps happen, or what advice you would give an organization when they're looking at creating something that is comprehensive and aligned and not sporadically happening throughout the organization.
That's such a wonderful question. Well, the first thing I would say is take grace. None of us is perfect. We're all here to do what's right for kids. And we need to be humble in our approaches because none of us are perfect. And we are a learning organization here at the Urban Assembly. Every year we refine our systems and our structure so that we can do better by our schools and better by the partners who work with us. And so that's what it is. It's to take a learning stance and understand, take your feedback and then incorporate it into your new approach. So the first thing I would say is everybody thinks everybody else has it. We are all just one step ahead of each other, learning from each other to do right by kids. The second thing I would say is that we're all doing social and emotional learning. There's not a school right now who's not impacting the social and emotional development of their young people. The question is, how intentional are you around that impact? Number one. And number two, are you impacting in positive ways or in ways that are less positive? And so to the extent that all schools are doing social and emotional learning, all students are receiving social and emotional inputs, we might as well do it well, right? We might as well be intentional about the kinds of inputs that our young people are receiving so that when they graduate, they're graduating ready to contribute to their community, to college and as well as to career opportunities. So the work we do with Bridge Boston and New York City and across the country It's really about organizing and creating a lens, as you said, Chris. I call it the matrix effect, right? So Morpheus keeps telling Neo, you're in the matrix. And Neo's like, no, 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 I'm living this world. He's like, no, you're in the matrix. And finally, at the end, he stands up and he starts to see all the little green dialogue. And he's like, oh my gosh, I can do what I want to do. I'm in the matrix, right? And SEL is the same way, is when we start to see these interactions as both social and emotional and instructional, we recognize that those turn and talks, that Socratic dialogues, the responsibility charts in elementary school, stations, all those things impact the social emotional development of our young people. So what that means in terms of advice for a school, recognize you're already doing it. Be sure about naming it, claiming it, and then directing it towards the outcomes that you want, and then integrate it in ways that make sense. So your extracurricular activities, talk about cross-country, supports goal-directed behavior and self-management. Your art class helps support your self-awareness and perspective taking. Your debate club helps you develop your communication skills and listening, right? All these things are social emotional skills. When we recognize that, it'll be easier to do it. Students will be empowered and have the agency to deploy these skills in terms of their interests, and we'll build a better community for our schools, our society, and our country writ large.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I am curious, some people may not know you have some superpowers that also led all the way up to Washington, D.C. On SEL Day, we saw that President Biden signed a proclamation to make it official, that we have SEL Day every year. Could you share a little bit more insight on how did you help to make that happen? Not just in the United States, but there were several states across America that also made, our SEL Learning Day. So tell us a little bit more.
Well, I was very proud of that, Craig. And, I was speaking on a podcast, and a young woman, not a young one, but actually a woman had said, I've been working very hard she was a Sandy Hook mother. Her son was killed in Sandy Hook. She said, I've been really working hard to have these concepts recognized by the White House. And I'm really appreciative that you guys at the UA were able to make that happen. So, we care about bringing folks together, Craig. That's what it is. It's a lot harder to find bridges than to blow them up, right? To build bridges and to destroy them. It's a lot harder to find commonalities than to find differences. And so we've just been blessed to really work with folks who want to resonate with our windows in terms of the windows into our society and ourselves and the mirrors that reflect themselves. And we had a wonderful concept this year, finding common ground, building the common good. And we know right now in our country, we are struggling to find common ground and build the common good. And that's what is expected of us as citizens, is expected of us as leaders and education leaders. And just very blessed that this year we were able to resonate all the way up to the White House with a message that hopefully brought folks together around the ways that social and emotional skills can help us be a better community. And at the end of the day, I care about community. I care about fairness and justice in our communities. And I'm very blessed to be able to play a small part in moving that conversation forward to honor folks like you, Craig, who has dedicated yourself and your school and your presence to lifting folks up, building community, making sure our next generation is strong.
Thank you, man. And for those who don't know, SEL Day is March 11th. So that was this past year. It doesn't mean that it's going to be March 11th every year. Does it change? For those who don't know, David.
And can I add into Craig goes beyond his school and his immediate community up in Boston. It is not uncommon for us to get video messages via text or email with Craig giving out positive messages and just thinking of you. And so he spreads it way beyond his physical community too.
Yeah, look, I got I got two things to say on this real quickly, right? Like, we live in a society where influencers are the folks who have the least to say about the most positive things, right? Where the folks who get the airtime are not the folks who are trying to lift other folks up. They're the folks who start arguments, the folks who point out the weaknesses of others rather than lift up the strengths. And so folks like Craig, man, like, we do this work to honor you, man. Like, we do this work so that you continue to have the energy to lift folks up, to put positivity in the world. A lot of cynics out there, a lot of folks who don't believe in our ability to do better. Just because in the past we haven't done the best doesn't mean that we can't get better as a society in the future. So that's what I would say. I honor the work that you do, Craig, as you know. I honor the work of our educators across the country. And SEL Day was that opportunity to say, we see you, we appreciate you. And if you felt good about that, give it to somebody else, right? Take that same energy and put it into somebody else, because that's what it takes to keep the energy, to keep the strength, and to move us forward.
Absolutely. And it requires us to be mirrors at times. So it is not, when we know that we're actually giving back what we're putting out into the world. For those who may not have that energy, they may need it. And so I'm only grateful that as part of my walk every day, that I can continue to nurture my light and share it as often as I can, because I'm getting some of that same energy and love from you, David, and Krista, and many others. So I'm only grateful that I can be a vehicle for light and love and change.
Well, what the old gospel song says, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, right? So you take your little light and let it shine out into the world so that folks are inspired by what you put in there, and then can mirror and shine for others. So I appreciate that, Craig. Appreciate you, and appreciate being in community and relationship with the work that you do.
It made me think of a lighthouse. Craig is a lighthouse.
Guiding folks in, right?
Yes. Can I have a question? Because of course I have questions. I always have questions.
It's a podcast, right? So it's okay.
It reminded me of how we need to really help people understand what SEL is and name it. And I think that we've experienced some barriers with that. As I think, because if you first start talking to people about SEL, immediately they say it's relationships. And I agree. But then I try to expand it and have them see it's 1/5. Like, there's other pieces. I've been called a castle purist. And so I really do go back to those 5 competencies. And we need to name those and then name the subcategories and get really familiar with what it looks like so that we can notice it everywhere we're at. And I think that perhaps over time, when we put things into an acronym, we forget what it really is, right? And so SEL, people forget that it is a set of skills. Mm-hmm. And I think of it as along a continuum. And I'm doing a self-assessment on all 5 of those competencies all the time. What do I need to adjust? How am I doing? And so I think sometimes people think it's a set of values that we're pushing. And that's where some of the confusion comes in, and having people understand it's a set of skills to open up dialogue in a respectful way so that we're hearing one another and that we can stand firm in who we are and our identities and show up so that we can learn to our best. But I've also heard, and I'm interested in learning more, because many of our educators in the US are white women. And so when you think about social emotional learning, we are bringing that invisible backpack that Craig has talked about before and that Peggy McIntosh talks about. And the idea of not whitewashing SEL and really having it be something that is culturally sustaining, that we're really looking at skill sets and helping people connect. And I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on what that looks like when we're blending social emotional learning explicitly with diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, and cultural competency.
Well, this is an outstanding question, and I want to take us back to about the 60s, Dr. James Comer and the Social Development Project, right, over in New Haven. And he's a psychiatrist out of Yale, and he's looking at specifically the Black community here in New Haven and thinking through this notion of development and how development infuses the concepts infused in schools, right? And he's often considered to be one of the fathers of the fields of social and emotional learning, along with folks like Dr. Elias, Dr. Roger Weisberg, who's recently passed. And he really looked at this notion of how do we ensure that students are getting all of their needs met in order to bring the best versions of themselves to schools, right? And now, about 50 years later, we recognize that the science of learning and development has backed up what folks knew intuitively or through observational research, that the brain and the classroom are intimately connected to the feelings and the cognition of a student, right? And so what do we know about social and emotional learning as a research field, right? We know from social and emotional learning that social and emotional skills predict up to 20 years after they've been taught things like students' life satisfaction, things like the likelihood of being on public welfare, things like quality of relationships, things like earnings. These are things that are predicted by social and emotional skill development. And they're predicted a long time after the skills have been assessed or developed by students. What else do we know? We also know that while there are differences in terms of incoming social emotional skills across race for students that are predicted a lot by family structure, we know based on our research that high quality social emotional learning programming benefits all students, regardless of gender, regardless of race, even regardless of international outcomes, right? Because these are a set of skills that facilitate problem solving. So these are things that we know. And then the last thing that we know is when we look at the research around social emotional learning is that when we deliver concepts in ways that integrate with students' existing understandings of themselves, right, it's easier for students to consolidate that learning and apply it and generalize it. So it is up to supporting our teachers to create opportunities for students to link to these ideas in ways that resonate with their own backgrounds, right? Recently wrote an article with Dr. Sheldon Akins looking at culturally responsive social and emotional approaches. One of the key ideas of that article or book chapter is that when we approach students by asking them things like, how do you receive and deliver respect in your home, in your community, right? Starting with that question then allows us to say, all right, well, is it a handshake? Is it a dap? In the military, is it a hand salute? Well, these things serve similar functions, although they look differently. Now we're going to talk about a handshake and how it works in society to confer respect from the person who's receiving it to the person who is giving it, or vice versa. And so when you start with these big ideas, these essential questions in the social emotional development, you're understanding that we connect to a student's experience, use that experience to connect back to a larger principle, and then use that principle to develop student skills. So the three things I'll say on this is we have really good research on programs and social emotional learning programs. They are the most effective way to develop the social emotional skills of young people. Those skills matter for life's success. The second thing I'll say is that teaching is about connecting to students' experiences and connecting an idea or construct to a student's understanding, right? Otherwise, we just have robots. One of the key aspects of great teaching is to connect abstract ideas to concrete student experiences. And the last thing I'll say is that when we do that, we do it by taking students' lived experience and then connecting them to social and emotional concepts so that students understand, and this is a teacher level activity, not necessarily a curricular level activity, right? Students understand what we're talking about because they have their own lived experiences. We bring that lived experience out, connect it back to the construct, and then land the skill development so students can develop the things that they need to be successful.
David, I really appreciate one of the nuggets that you just shared about the connecting the abstract ideas to concrete student experiences. One of the misgivings I perceive or have seen in some of the SEL work that I'm seeing here on the ground is some teachers struggle with having too much apathy and not necessarily acknowledge that, as you talked about earlier, students come with assets, and there is an opportunity here to build on those assets, including the cultural assets that young people have. I'm curious, what are some lessons that you have that you would extend to our audience who are trying to figure out, how do I do this right? I hear what I think I hear and understand what David is sharing here, but how do I make sure I'm doing it right? Because I don't want to do it wrong. And I believe most teachers want to do it right. They want to actually positively impact the lives of young people. But this here might be something that we need to unpack a little bit more for the audience.
Yeah, this is a great question, Craig. So when I was director of SEL, we used to do walkthroughs, and one of the questions we'd ask our students is, what SEL skill do you wish that teachers would develop the most effectively? And usually I got active listening in the context of relationship skills, right? Our students really want to be heard and seen and paid attention to. They're adolescents, mostly high school for us, right? So it's par for the course. But when we listen and pay attention to our students, we have the ability to connect the things that we want to deliver to the experiences of young people. And so what I would say here is that pay attention to your young people. As you mentioned, Craig, I have two kids, Elijah and Isaiah. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you can see. It's a little. Let me see if I can get it. There you go. That's my son. He wrote me a note. I keep it up on my wall. He says I'm a good dad. So,
Yeah.
So we do character read every night. And what we do is that my sons on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I pick out a quote. On Thursday, they pick out their own quote, and then they relate their quote to things that they care about. And my son is really into anime. Both of my sons, they really like Naruto. They like Bleach. They like all these animes, and they're very resonant with these ideas that these shows put forth. And so 90% of the quotes that we read ends up in some Naruto reference, just like Naruto or Sasuke, right? And the point is that we just got to really pay attention to what our kids are listening to and resonating with, and then invite them into this conversation. We're not teaching kids social emotional skills as much as we are developing their understanding of how the things that they do relate to this construct called social emotional learning, so that they can refine and deploy it in ways that meet their intent. So, and in a practical way here, Craig, again, we just wrote a book, a chapter focused on teacher moves around social emotional learning. And the two teacher moves that we most identified as related to social emotional skills were skills around perspective taking, paying attention to how students are receiving information, and active listening. And perspective taking is really important because when you correct misconceptions for students, you have to do it from the student's perspective if you want to really have that student learn. So when you're teaching and you're watching how the student is receiving the information, and then you're giving them feedback, not because you think it's right or wrong, really, but because you're trying to understand how the student is taking in your information and applying that to their own schema or knowledge set. So you got to have perspective taking skills. You got to have listening skills, social cues. You got to be paying attention to how the students are struggling or not struggling with the materials. And these are all kinds of things that help us to be the best version of teachers that we can be. The same way we teach ELA and we make connections to students' lives, the same way we teach social emotional skill sets and make connections to student lives. I'll say one last piece here. Most of our students feel like social emotional instruction is the best when it's active, when students can participate in it, when it's not like a didactic class, but it's an experience and an activity where students are lifting up their own experiences and talking back to the teacher around how they've resolved conflicts, how they've built relationships, how they've developed their perspective-taking skills.
Yeah. As soon as you said that, I'm thinking, oh, there's the SAFE acronym: sequenced, active, focused, and explicit. And, there's foundational skills that need to be built. So we can't expect students to be empathetic if we haven't talked about perspective taking and understanding. And the active listening piece really stuck out for me because I need to practice that still too, especially when I'm having conversations with my kids and they're 20, 17, and 16, and we're having something that is tight to my core values, and you get like that, like I even went back to my 17-year-old one time and I'm like, I'm sorry. I feel like I interrupted you. And it was because I was passionate about it, but I didn't listen as well as I could have and I should have. Because the kids deserve the respect as well to share their mindsets. And that's how I think we build those relationships and really understand their perspective. And then the other part that really stuck with me was your quotes at night with your sons. And I love that because you get some insight into what's important to them and how they're making sense of the world. My one son likes to play music for me when we're in the car before he got his license. And he'd be like, oh, it's got a bad word, or it's about, suicide, but I'm like, but let me listen. Let's talk about it. Like, what about this song? Is it the lyrics? Is it the beat? Like, what's resonating with you? And not that those are heavy topics and not that it was something he was taking on, but there were parts that we needed to talk about with life. And I think that those are some really key opportunities that we should recognize and really hold on to.
Yeah, Craig had mentioned this one piece, and I don't want to miss it, this notion of assets. We have students who drop off their brothers or sisters or kid brothers or sisters every single day. And that's really showing responsibility, right? And a teacher will say, oh, you don't bring your homework in. And through the social emotional process, we've had students say, this is how I show responsibility, right? Actually, my mom works 2 jobs and I pretty much take care of the house. And that's shifted a teacher's understanding of a student to a person, right? Because we're building people. You don't just turn 18 and then just go out in society a fully formed human, right? Like, we have to develop the people we want to see in our societies. And so by having these conversations, by lifting up the assets of our young people, by exploring them as people, not just students, we are preparing young people to enter our society ready to contribute and ready to give what they can of themselves to the society that we live in.
And they can do it. The more I work with, and I said kids earlier, and as soon as I said it, I'm like, that wasn't the right word. Our younger people. Sometimes I think the more I work with them, if we would just get out of their way and let them lead, and we'd be so amazing, because they're ready, they're geared up, they're so much more knowledgeable than I feel we are in so many ways. Just thank you. You've dropped so many amazing pieces. I want to go back and re-listen to this again. And I look forward to the article that you're coming out with Dr. Sheldon Eakins. And you have a ton of articles that you've published, and we're going to link all of that because we want people to get as much access to you and your work as possible.
Well, thank you so much, Krista and Craig, man. It's always a benefit to me to see you, to listen to you, to be inspired by you. Keep doing the work, man. We see you, appreciate you, and I look forward to thinking about how we can get back in community again.
Absolutely. I look forward to, but before we go and we close, and we will close in a second, David, for those who want to, they would love to find you or connect with you or just follow some of the work that you're doing, what's the best ways that they can do that?
Well, thanks for asking, Craig. So you can find me Twitter, @DAdams_SEL. You can find me on LinkedIn, David Adams. We have a social emotional learning symposium coming up in May. Be sure to register for that. We have some great speakers who are going to be focusing on integrating social emotional skills in order to support our communities, our society. So very, very excited about it, and always happy to have folks in community and having conversation with folks across social media.
Thank you so much for your time and your willingness to share your expertise and experiences with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, David, I will close with a couple of things. One is you was talking about Naruto, and I definitely have a great love for anime as well. You made me think about a quote from Hanada, and this is really how
Drop it.
this really resonated for me.
Yeah.
When I watch you, I feel strong, like I can do anything. And David, when I and so many others actually watch you, we do feel stronger and we do feel like we can do anything. So we're glad that you joined us. And we are so excited to share this conversation and continue conversation with the rest of the world. We are so excited that we go continue the conversation with David and many others. So uh, as we close, I want to send y'all tons, or we want to send you tons of love and light. And we just ask that you continue to stand in the light because so many are looking to so many of us in this world. So thank you.
Thank you.